Hi everybody, very welcome to Mentour and yet another video podcast. As always, I hope you're doing absolutely fantastic. Today on the video, guys, we're going to be talking about the cataclysmic change that is now happening to the airline industry. Is this actually the beginning of the end of the low-fare airlines? Stay tuned.
Wind 31016, everyone right, right on right. Third land, 31 right.
Delta 260, produced.
This video is brought to you in cooperation with Skillshare. Now, Skillshare is an online learning platform with thousands of high-quality courses and pretty much anything that you can imagine. Did you know that random acts of creativity actually helps relieve stress? And I know because I've been spending a lot of time during these few weeks trying to come up with new videos for you guys. But maybe you want to do something different, like learning how to paint or creative writing or photography. In that case, there is a course for you inside of Skillshare. And a course that I think that you guys might enjoy is learning how to fly with Howard Forder. I have been doing that together with my oldest son. And basically Howard is an instructor that helps you use your home simulator to prepare for your PPL license. Now, those of you who uses this link here below will get 2 months of premium Skillshare absolutely for free. So go down, click it, and let me know which one is your favorite course. All right, so obviously we're still seeing the bloodbath that is this current COVID crisis for the airline industry. A lot of airlines all over the world have still their entire fleets sitting on the ground, and for every day that goes by, they're losing more and more money. Now, there's been a lot of articles around in the press saying that this is the end of the low-fare airlines and that we will start to pay much higher prices for a ticket soon. Is there any truth to that? Well, obviously, I don't own a crystal ball, but what I can do is I can start discussing with you 3 different scenarios which are likely to happen. All right, one of these scenarios will happen, and depending on what happens, it's going to have very different outcomes. But before we start, we have to understand how come that the low-fare airlines and the really cheap tickets have existed in the first place. And in order for you to understand that, first of all, there are some really great videos out on YouTube that you can check if you want the full story about it. I'm just going to give you the kind of gist of it. And the low-fare airline industry really kicked off after 1978 with the Deregulation Act back in the United States. Before then, the states had, basically could hand out different combination of city pairs to different airlines. So there was never really any effective competition. That's why the major airlines, both in the United States and in Europe, they could charge some really high prices. And, basically only the rich people were able to fly. And with that came perks, like you had free food, you could take as much luggage as you want, you had nice lounges, and flying was something that was, considered to be only for the rich, with all of the perks that comes with that. Now, after 1978, the governments came in, and in the States they said, listen, we don't really like this. This is not good for the consumer. We need to do something in order to get the prices down, to let more people be able to fly. So they deregulated the market. Then all of a sudden you saw that, new types of airlines started to spring up, the biggest of whom is Southwest Airlines. And these low-cost airlines, they had a very different type of operation. First of all, they tend to focus very clearly on the cost of each step of their operation. This means that anything from how much paper that you're using to print your flight plans to, staffing costs, how much you pay to airports, to handling operations, all of that is being very carefully controlled and negotiated at every single step to make sure that there's no spillage of money. Okay, that's number one. Very low cost base. And then they tend to operate only one type of aircraft. That tends to be a medium haul, single aisle aircraft. And the reason they want to keep and stick to one type is because it is much cheaper to streamline the operation. It means that you only need one type of spares, you only need the same type of training for all of the pilots, the cabin crew, the engineers out there, and it's easy to swap one aircraft for another in case one will go tech, for example. Another thing they do is they, at least in Europe, normally fly to secondary airport. So instead of flying to London Heathrow, they fly to Gatwick, Stansted or Luton. And by doing so, it means that they pay less in landing fees and handling fees, and also there tends to be less holding patterns, so they will be quicker to come in and out and do quick turnarounds. And quick turnarounds is essential here, because the lower time that an airline spends with their aircraft sitting on the ground, the more time they're in the air making money. Another thing that the low-fare airlines do is they take the things that were traditionally offered for free on the more expensive ticket, like for example meals on board or carry-on luggage, and they charge for it. So this means effectively that you, as a consumer, you can choose to fly very, very cheap by adhering to the rules and not buying anything, or you can make your trip more pleasant by buying, for example, priority boarding or as much luggage as you want, or whatever in-flight meal that you want, but then it's going to cost you more. So it gives the consumer more choice. Now, one thing that helps the low-fare airlines to have the prices as low as they have is also the secondary market of airplanes. So you might have seen some of these low-fare airlines going out and contacting Airbus and Boeing and buying aircraft in bulk, yes, in buying hundreds of aircraft in one single order. And when they do that, they get some quite significant discounts on the aircraft. So much discount, in fact, that they can order them, buy them, operate them for a few years, and then sell them on the secondary market for more money than they actually bought them for. That money is then being taken into the airline and being used to reduce the ticket prices for you. So why am I telling you all this? Well, because the current crisis is going to come and make some changes to this, right? Some of these changes are hopefully going to be temporary, but some of them might also affect the way that the low-fare airlines operate. Now, in these three scenarios that's coming up, I'm going to assume that social distancing is not going to become law. Okay, social distancing on board aircraft cannot become law, because if it does, it means that all bets are off when it comes to ticket prices. There's going to have to be at least a 50 to 60% increase just to cover the blocked off rows, and it's going to become almost impossible to drive a profitable airline. So I'm going to assume that that's not going to become law, that it's just going to be something temporary. So then we have three different scenarios. The first scenario is that 2020 is a lost year, and in 2021 we will start to see a gradual increase back to pre-COVID passenger levels. Scenario 2 is that 2020 and 2021 are lost years, and then in 2022 we are going to start to see a gradual increase. And scenario 3 is that it's going to go beyond 2022, possibly even beyond 2023, before we see the passenger numbers start rising up to where they were before this crisis started. Now, in scenario 1, where the 2020 is completely gone, we already see that there's no bookings for this summer, and there's going to be very little bookings for this winter, and we don't really know where the virus is going to pop up. Passengers are unlikely to want to travel. Well, in that case, what will happen is that a lot of the financially struggling airlines, we've already seen it started, they're going to start going bankrupt, and even some of the more well-run airlines, but who are still kind of teetering a little bit, they are going to go bankrupt. Now, what that will do, and this is mainly in Europe, but it's going to happen in the United States as well, but what it will do is it will release a lot of pilots and cabin crew and engineers into the working market. Now, the legacy carriers, as in the big national carriers, they are probably going to be bailed out by their governments. But with those bailouts will come the risk of having to pay that money back, obviously, but also it's likely that the states are going to come in and put some, for example, environmental conditions onto these bailouts. So say that, yes, we will pay you these billions of euros, but in turn you are going to need to improve on this and this and this and this from an environmental point of view. That's going to make the operation of these airlines a little bit less flexible. On the other hand, they will have more money, so they will still continue to operate. But from a low fare point of view, this means that only the strongest players are going to be left. And these strongest players, they are likely going to use this crisis in order to put an enormous pressure on the labor unions out there to try to decrease the salaries, terms and conditions for not only the time that this is going on, but probably for the coming years in order to recoup any losses that they potentially will make. So this means that once again, they will be pushing down their cost base. On the other side of the spectrum, they will now have less competition. So they will use this pile of cash that they've built up. They will use this cash to wither through the 2020 slump and then the beginning of 2021. And then once the wheel starts turning again, they are going to have less labor costs. It's probably going to be able to avail of much lower oil prices, and they're going to be able to grab a bigger market share. So if scenario 1 happens, I foresee some much stronger, bigger low-fare airlines. These ones are going to use their cash to compete with lower prices, to compete against the legacy carriers who've been getting bailouts from the states. And in this scenario, I can actually foresee that the low-fare prices is going to continue, maybe not to as extreme low level as we had before, but we're definitely going to be able to see, 60 euro tickets within Europe, for example, or within the United States. Now, in scenario 2, things are starting to become a little bit more complicated. So this means that the 2020 is gone, 2021 is gone as well, and we're only starting to see a gradual kind of return to normality in 2022. Now, in the first scenario, it's unlikely that the kind of behavior of the passengers would have changed much. Now, there would have been a dramatic economic recession, which means that a lot of people wouldn't necessarily be able to afford to fly or go on vacation. But if it's only for a year or less than that, people still remember how nice it was to go on a vacation to Spain or go to travel to see other cultures and countries and things like that. And remember, it is extremely important that the passengers do keep traveling. Because the low-fare airlines, what they have done over the last two and a half decades is that they've created a completely new type of passenger. Where before then, only the really wealthy people were able to fly, to go on vacation like that. Because of the low prices that the low-fare airlines have provided, the low to medium income household have also been able to go and do these travels. Now, if we're looking into a scenario number 2, which means we've had a huge recession, even a depression over 2 years, the available income of these groups, the low to medium income household, will have been almost completely depleted. Like, they will not be able to afford. And also, if you have gone 2 years, maybe 2.5 years without going on vacation, well, then you would probably have changed your behavior, as in looked at, what can I do closer to home? Can I take my car and go maybe camping, or look at what's available inside my own country? And you might have a complete change of how passengers are behaving. Okay, so that is one of the big threats if we go in as far as into scenario number 2. But also on top of that, all of the airlines that have had any kind of struggles economically, and even some of the really well-run airlines, which are privately owned, are going to go bankrupt at this stage. So only the very, very strongest players could survive into scenario 2. The legacy carriers will still probably survive to a certain extent. However, they are going to be laden out of huge government loans, which are going to have to be paid back. And also, we will start to see governments out there that are struggling very, very badly, and they are unlikely to start paying out huge billion-dollar loans or subsidies to airlines. So in the end of scenario 2, we're going to start to see legacy carriers going under as well, and only the very, very strongest privately owned low-fare companies are going to be able to survive. Now, these companies, they will definitely be able to avail of a much cheaper labor force. They will also be able to avail of the lower oil prices, but only for a little bit, and I'll get to that in a second. And also, they are going to be able to take huge market share. That's because basically the competition is now completely gone. The oil price is likely to be low in the beginning. However, because of the extension of this crisis now, and there's going to be a lot of oil producers out there who would have gone bankrupt, which means that a lot of oil wells are going to be closed down, and you can't just open up an oil well like that. It costs hundreds of millions of dollars to get things running again. So that means that the supply of oil is going to be much, much lower. And as the demand is starting to increase, it's likely that the oil price is going to increase very, very quickly as well. Now, another thing is the secondary market of airplanes. In case this scenario 2 happens, the secondary market of airplanes is going to be very cheap. There's going to be a lot of available aircraft out there. Now, this is going to severely affects the aircraft manufacturers. Boeing and Airbus is definitely going to be struggling in this scenario. And the airlines, low-fare airlines, will not be able to resell their used aircraft out on the market. So there will not be any income come from that. However, what you would probably see in this scenario is that the low-fare airlines that still have a little bit of cash, they will start to look into buying maybe long-haul aircraft to be able to take up market share where the legacy carriers are now struggling to remain profitable or on traffic. So you might see in the secondary scenario that the low-fare giants are starting to go into markets that they haven't been in before, right? Out of necessity or just because they see a possibility. Now, the cash flow is still going to be very low here for a long time. So it is likely that even the strongest low-fare airlines is going to have to start going out and maybe take out mortgages on their aircraft. So in this scenario, you can see that the cost that the airlines are bearing is now increasing quite a lot, and that cost is going to have to be taken by the consumer at some point. So in scenario 2, you are starting to see quite a lot higher prices. The low fares of that we've gotten used to for the last couple of decades are definitely going to change. It might still be affordable to do flights within Europe, maybe 150 euros for a single ticket or something like that, but it's unlikely that you will ever find something like what we're seeing right now. All right, that's in scenario 2. Now, in scenario 3, we have the nightmare scenario. This is that 2020 is gone, 2021 and 2022 is gone, and only in 2023 or even beyond that, we will start to see a return to some kind of normality in life. In that scenario, it's unlikely that we will ever see, at least within a decade, the passenger numbers coming back to what we've seen in 2019. Plainly because there is just no money. People can't travel. And at this point, all of the privately owned airline out there is going to go bankrupt. Like, there is no market for that long. No airline in the world have enough cash flow in order to keep running, and the governments will not want to support them. The only airlines that will still survive are some national airlines that are going to be deemed necessary from an infrastructure point of view, and those are going to be only operating routes that are absolutely necessary for the nation to survive. So, for example, cargo routes, getting essential supplies, getting spares to the machinery that is needed for factories, things like that. And if you want to go flying on one of these aircraft, it is going to cost you an arm and a leg, right? It is not going to be affordable. We're going to go back to a world which we saw back in the 1970s, where only the super rich can afford to go on vacation. Also, we're now looking at 4 to 5, maybe 6, 10 years, up to a decade without having been able to travel. So humans, we adapt. In this case, it doesn't mean that you necessarily don't go on vacation anymore. It just means that you are going on vacation in a completely different way, right? So the third scenario is an absolute devastating scenario for the airline business. right? There's no other words to put on it. So those are the 3 different scenarios that I can foresee. Now, which one do I think is most likely? I think personally that we're looking at scenario 1 possibly moving slightly into scenario 2. So I think that in 2021 we're going to see an increase back to maybe 70-80% of where we were in 2019, and then in 2022 we're going to be back more or less, and we are going to see some changes in passenger behavior. We're also going to see costs in, for example, new procedures in airports that will prolong the turnaround times, which means that it's going to be less efficient to do these really short turnaround times. All of this spelled more costs for the airlines. So we are going to see an increase in prices, but not as extreme as it was back in the 70s. But, you know, if you would be able to fly within Europe for 50 euros now, maybe it's going to cost you 75, 80 euros or something if that scenario comes true. But I might be wrong. This is why I would like you guys to come into the discussion forum either here in the comments below and tell me what you think. Maybe you're an expert and you think that I've completely forgotten something. I might. This is just my own thoughts about the subject. Or come into the Mentour Aviation app. All right, I'm going to create a forum in the app just named ticket prices or future ticket prices or something like that, where we can have this discussion in a positive and a constructive and safe way. So use the link here below to get the free Mentour Aviation app, and just tag @Mentour if you want to send me a message. I also want to send a huge thank you to the sponsor of this episode, which is Skillshare. You can support me by supporting them. Click the link here below and get 2 months of premium Skillshare absolutely for free, and tell me which one of the courses you like the most. And a special thank you to my Patreon crew. You might not have noticed it, but what I'm doing nowadays is basically creating videos for you guys. I research videos, I find different topics to talk about, and I create videos for you guys. And one of the main reasons I am able to do that now when I'm not flying is because of my Patreon crew, right? You guys are supporting me both financially, but by helping me reviewing what I'm talking about, telling me if I say something that's completely wrong, and you're just a huge asset to my channel. So if you're sitting there out now and you're thinking, I want to support this guy, I think what he's doing is right, well then go down, click on the link, or go to patreon.com/mentorpilot, and you can support with as little or as much as you like. Everything is appreciated. If you go in at the $10 per month level, you'll also get premium membership inside of the Mentour Aviation app, and any of my Patreons gets access to my Discord server where we can hang out and you can discuss anything you want with all of the other patrons. Have an absolutely fantastic day wherever you are, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye. Right guys, I really hope that you liked that. If you want more content like that, more aviation content, well then, check this out. I hope that you have subscribed to the channel and that you've highlighted the little notification bell. See you inside of the Mentour Aviation app, and have an absolutely fantastic day. Bye-bye.